Welcome, guys. I'm Dr. Mike Hansen, a board-certified physician specializing in internal medicine, pulmonary disease, and critical care medicine. Now, I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of COVID patients between the intensive care unit, doing pulmonary consults in the hospital, as well as in the pulmonary clinic. Recently, I saw Joe Rogan's video in the news that came out that he got COVID, and he took some things for that, including ivermectin.
Turns out I got COVID.
So, Joe Rogan, just in case you're watching this video, I'm going to call you out on some of the things you said in your video.
Hello, friends. So, I got back from the road Saturday night, feeling very weary. I had a headache, and I just felt run down. And
yeah, that's typically how COVID starts. One thing I've noticed, and researchers in the UK have noticed this as well, is that more or higher percentage of the COVID symptoms are starting with these head cold symptoms, in addition to the systemic symptoms of just feeling run down, plus the fever and the chills and the body aches.
Just to be cautious, I separated from my family, slept in a different part of the house, and throughout the night, I got fevers and sweats, and I knew what was going on. So I got up in the morning, got tested, and turns out I got COVID. So we immediately threw the kitchen sink at it, all kinds of meds, monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin, Z-Pak, prednisone, everything. And I also got an NAD drip and a vitamin drip, and I did that 3 days in a row. And so here we are on Wednesday, and I feel great. I really only had one bad day. Sunday sucked, but Monday was better. Tuesday felt better than Monday, and today I feel good. I actually feel pretty fucking good. That's the good news. The bad news is we have to move the Friday show in Nashville.
All right, so a lot of things to unpack there, because he's telling you about his anecdotal case, and he's telling you about the things he took. You can't come to any conclusions based on his experience. He could have taken 0 medications, and he could have had that same exact outcome. This is why you do things, you learn things in studies and trials, not based on anecdotal cases. It's also why you have to control for all these different factors. And part of the reason why COVID is so hard to study, because you have lots of different people taking different things. Of course, you don't want to short someone by not giving them dexamethasone, because you know it reduces mortality. So that means you have to account for dexamethasone. Maybe this person got it, maybe that person didn't. So when you do these studies, you have to try and balance out all these baseline characteristics in addition to other factors as well. The thing about this is monoclonal antibodies are indicated for mild disease. That's fine. The other thing is azithromycin is an antibiotic. It kills certain bacteria, doesn't kill viruses. So giving azithromycin doesn't make any sense. What about a vitamin D drip? That's very strange, because doctors don't give vitamin D drips for COVID. Yes, this was studied in Brazil, and I made several videos about this already in my channel. That study, which is the biggest study for vitamin D in COVID, what they did was they gave a bunch of vitamin D, big doses, to people who had COVID, and they compared all the different baseline characteristics. And long story short is that giving IV vitamin D did not improve COVID outcomes. Now, where vitamin D does play a role with COVID, you don't want to have vitamin D deficiency long-term going into a COVID infection. Lots of different variables there, and it's hard to know correlation versus causation. But the bottom line is vitamin D, especially IV, is not an indication for COVID treatment. Which makes me wonder, who's prescribing this for him anyway, because that's not the standard of care. Physicians don't treat COVID with IV vitamin D. An NAD drip, totally bizarre. We never give that in the hospital, period, let alone for COVID. Prednisone, sort of makes sense, because it's basically the brother of dexamethasone. It's a steroid. And what that does for moderate to severe COVID is that can improve mortality in those conditions. But those only improve mortality when they had moderate to severe COVID. He obviously doesn't have moderate or severe COVID, because if that were the case, he would have lower oxygen levels. Then we save the best for last, ivermectin. It's not FDA approved, and it's not recommended by the CDC or the WHO. Why? Because there haven't been solid studies that show that it works. Now, it seems like it's safe when taken at doses that's used to treat head lice, scabies, or parasitic infections. That's typically, for most people, around 15 to 20 milligrams. Now, when you hear about these stories in the news about people getting ivermectin from livestock supply, in that case, they're taking 10 to 15 times the amount that they should be taking. And that's when you hear about these phone calls going to poison control centers. That was my last video that I made. So the bottom line with ivermectin is it hasn't been shown to work. And when you start getting in really high doses, the risk of toxicity goes up. And that's when you get severe side effects, seizures, coma, and so forth. I have no idea how much prednisone he took. I have no idea how much ivermectin he took. No way for me to know that. I have no idea what the COVID's going to do to him. Most likely, nothing. He got better already, he said, and usually things are fine. But sometimes it happens where people have mild illness of COVID and it progresses to more severe disease. I've seen it happen many times. I've seen it happen in people who are just like him, his age, who are healthy and in their 40s and their 50s, and they come in, they've been having mild disease for a week, and then they finally get to the hospital, and then things go bad. But when you say that I took this drug, whether it's ivermectin or whatever, and it worked for me, that has a huge impact when you have 16 million followers, because some of your followers will hang on to every word that you say. But like I said earlier, you're just an anecdotal case. There are people who made the news when remdesivir came out saying, remdesivir, I felt great right when I took it. But guess what? The studies don't show that it works very well.
Crazy times we're living in, but a wonderful, heartfelt thank you to modern medicine for pulling me out of this so quickly and easily. And my love to all of you. Thank you.
A heartfelt thank you to modern medicine. Well, Joe, this is what modern medicine says. It says, get the FDA-approved vaccine. It says, don't take the non-FDA-approved ivermectin. It also says dexamethasone is indicated for moderate to severe COVID illness. It also says monoclonal antibodies for mild illness. You got that one right. It also says no vitamin D drip for COVID. It also says no NAD drip for anything. So if you're sincere about giving a big thank you to modern medicine, you should echo what the experts say. You should echo what the CDC says. I'm actually a fan of the Joe Rogan podcast, but I'm not a fan of COVID misinformation. But by you doing this and some of the things that you said, it's only contributing to the problem of misinformation, the misinformation pandemic. You're only further worsening the problem. Before, you're on record of saying that, well, if you're young and healthy, you don't need to get vaccinated. That's not the case. People, young and healthy, have gotten sick. Not only that, but they can still spread the virus to others, which is only further contributing towards the pandemic. Now, I did do a video on exercise and how that relates to the severity of COVID illness. And basically, in that study, it showed that exercising helps to reduce the severity of COVID if you did get COVID. But that's not a substitute for getting the vaccine. You can't compare the two. The vaccine gives you way more protection than just exercising. Well, Joe, then you talk about natural immunity and that not enough people are talking about natural immunity and boosting your immune system. Boosting is actually a misnomer because you can't boost your immune system by natural means. Yes, you can get a vaccine and a booster shot. That can boost your immune system towards specific illness. But you can't actually boost your immune system naturally. You can optimize your immune system. And of course, it's great to get great sleep, 8-9 hours per night, to eat healthy, to exercise, to do all these things. That's fantastic. And people should do these things. But that in itself isn't good enough. It's not going to be a substitute for getting the vaccine. The thing of it is, Joe, you have a big platform, you're a huge influence, and with that comes a big responsibility. The other thing, Joe, is that it's hypocritical to say natural immunity, and then you go ahead and get monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin, azithromycin. Monoclonal antibodies is literally antibodies that were created somewhere else, and then you put them into your own body. That is not natural immunity, as you call it. When Bill Burr was on his podcast, he said this.
Let's not start this, Joe.
Do you, though?
Let's not start this. Okay.
Let's start it.
I don't want to start this bullshit. I'm not going to sit here with no medical degree, listening to you with no medical degree, with an American flag behind you, smoking a cigar, acting like we know what's up better than the CDC.
So a lot of people wonder if they had COVID, do they still need to get the vaccine? And one of my recent videos actually addressed that question. So people with a history of COVID still need to get the vaccine later on. And the level of immunity that you get from previous COVID, it's better than nothing at all, but it's not as good as the vaccine. And it's not as good as previously having COVID in addition to the vaccine. And so having COVID plus the vaccine is probably equivalent to having the shots, the jabs, in addition to the booster shot. Of course, that's assuming if you're not immunocompromised. I talk more about that in a different video, but I also want to bring in someone, my best friend, who is also a doctor. He's a psychiatrist, and he had COVID, and then he later got the vaccine, and then later on he got COVID again, presumably the Delta variant.